Alright, so this is going to be part 1 to what if Asta and Yuno were adopted by Mereoleona. So, for those who don't know who Mereoleona is, I'll quickly go over a summary of her. So, she is the sister of the captain of the Crimson Lion Kings, that being Fregolion Vermilion. Because she is his older sister, this makes her a royal and presumably the first in line to become the ruler of the Clover Kingdom. So let's go over a few of her stats and such. So she has a 5 out of 5 in physical strength, a 5 out of 5 in magic amount, a 5 out of 5 in magic control, a 4 out of 5 in magic sensing, a 4 out of 5 in cleverness, and a 5 out of 5 in courage. So she has some of the best stats in Black Clover, rivaling the Wizard King Julius Novachronos. So you could tell that she's a very powerful character, and you could even argue that she's more powerful than her brother Fregolion, who is a captain. So when I say that she is one of the best or one of the top people in the Clover Kingdom, there's reasons why. So in this, because she adopts both Yuno and Asta both become royal or become royalty by name and not by blood. So there is some stigma behind that because, well, they're adopted. So when we get into the scenario to set it up, there's gonna be a slight spoiler in the way that they're a. So when I mean spoiler, it's basically gonna show how Asta and Yuno would have gotten to the church, but things are gonna happen in between where they don't. So I'm gonna keep it as vague as possible, so it won't spoil much. The only thing it would spoil is how they get to the church, and even then, it's very vague in the manga anyway. So me saying this won't really affect too much, and frankly, I don't really consider it too much of a spoiler, if any, really. So our story would begin right when a man in kind of weird robes would go and try to go to the church. On his way there, he actually faints, or not really faints, but he falls over carrying 2 children. These children are both Asta and Yuno. And because Mereoleona was on her kind of, I guess, like voyage that she took when she was younger, where she just went to the like wild and went to each kind of heavy mana zones to kind of just live as she wanted. Because she was on that kind of adventure, I guess, she actually stumbles upon the man carrying the 2 children, and the man asks her to take care of them. And at first she really is doubtful of this, but then because the man has suffered many injuries, he actually dies, and she is left with no other option than to really accept his offer of raising the 2 boys. She doesn't really know the area, so she doesn't know whether or not it'd be a good idea to leave them in the care of random villagers. And again, she is in that kind of self adventure, so if she went to the capital, it might be more difficult for her to leave again. So that's the reason why she actually accepts it. Because she adopts him, she gives him the last name of Vermilion, which is her name, making them royals, like I said before. So she isn't the smartest when it comes to book smarts, because cleverness in Black Clover also takes into account of your kind of strategy during fights and your kind of fighting prowess and things like that. But it also does include obviously things like book smarts and things like that. So she obviously isn't dumb, but she isn't the smartest character, right? She isn't like a genius when it comes to the more academic side of cleverness, you would say. And because of a more rougher kind of lifestyle and a different diet, because that's really important, Yuno and Asta would become more physically stronger, So I believe Asta has a 5 out of 5 in physical strength already, so he'd be as strong as he was, a little bit faster. So I would say he'd be a little bit stronger than he was during, or he would be around the same strength when he was fighting Licht. Or yeah, Licht. I don't want to say too much about that since some people aren't that far. So he'd be around that level of physical strength, while Yuno has a 3 out of 3 or a 3 out of 5 physical strength right now, and has that since the beginning of the series, I believe. So let's say he's at a 4 out of 5, so he's pretty strong. He has the same strength as someone as the Wizard King, who has a 4 out of 5 in physical strength. And the reason why I would say this, that they would become stronger, is one, because of the rougher kind of training that Mereoleona would have given them, and because they live in the wild, they would have to really survive off of that. So she would really train them at an early age to try to use their magic. She would notice something's different, and that is Asta seems to have no magic. So she doesn't really know what this is. She either thinks that, well, one, Asta has so little magic that it's very barely visible, especially since they are in a heavily dense mana zone, as well as Yuno being very full of mana himself. So they don't really know why this is the case. The other idea that she has is that he has no magic at all, which in her mind is nearly impossible, because from what we know, Asta is really the only person in the Black Clover universe right now, the only human at least, to have no magic or born with no magic. So she doesn't know what's up. So she would try to get them to use magic, and Asta obviously couldn't, but she wouldn't give up on him. She would tell him every day to try and go for it. And I forgot to tell this earlier, but another reason why they would be stronger is because of the diet. Because Asta comes from a poor kind of village, the only resources of food he really had was pot potatoes, which I don't think is an actual vegetable at all. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be like similar to that of potatoes. So it's a lot. You could technically survive on that, but it's very questionable. So because he's in the wild for so long, and one of the big reasons why Mereoleona actually went to the wild is because of meat. So because of this extra protein that he would get and this rough style of life he would have, they would both get stronger. So yeah. Yuno, on the other hand, would get more, proficient with his magic, being able to use magic at an earlier age with more effectiveness than before, because we know that Mereoleona was taught at an early age, like I said before, to use magic by the nun, I believe, who used to be a captain. So yeah. So after a few years, or I guess during the few years until they become 15, she would teach him as much as she could. This would include techniques like mana zone and mana skin, so that they could have a better advantage in the world, because they're getting at that age where they need to go and find, or basically do what they want, because they're nearly adults in the Black Clover universe. So at this point, she would tell him the stories of the Wizard King, the first Wizard King, and things like Magic Knights. And she isn't someone to tell people what to do. Like what I mean by that is like their future and their kind of choices, right? She's always given everyone else a choice. Even when she was training people, she tells Asta, like, if you don't want to do this, then just give up, right? If you can't do this, give up. So that's what she kind of tells Asta. If you want to be the Wizard King, do it, or just give up. As well as, she says the same thing to kind of Yuno. Yuno is a prodigy, but she wouldn't really discourage Asta. I think she'd be a very caring person, at least in this kind of scenario. For someone like Asta who would be very, I guess, disappointed in himself for not having magic, for not living up to the expectations, she would understand how we would be feeling, and try to encourage him to rival that of Yuno. So they still get that kind of rivalry that you would see in canon. So we would skip a few more years, and this is the day where they get their grimoire. So they would go to the local tower. I don't think it would be the same. I guess we could say it's the same tower that they would have gone normally, just so that they have the encounter. So this is where Yuno would get that 4-leaf clover grimoire, that being of wind, and everyone kind of looking at what's happening, while Asta does not get a grimoire at this point. And Mereoleona would tell Asta that it seems that you have no magic. What are you going to do about that? And Asta, he is at his lowest point, or around his lowest point than he was in the anime, but he says, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to try to be the first, magic knight that doesn't have magic. And people there would be laughing at them, or at least laughing at Asta, because people there don't really know Mereoleona. So after this, Asta would storm out, while Mereoleona would be mad at people laughing at them, but not really saying anything too much. So eventually Yuno would be by himself, and this is where the chain mage actually comes in, or after the nobles would have threatened Yuno, this is where the chain mage would have came and tried to take his grimoire so he could sell it. Eventually Asta would come and try to save Yuno, and it really wouldn't work. He would get chained up, and the same thing goes in canon, where he gets his grimoire and unlocks his first sword, that being Demon Slayer sword, I believe that's what it's called. And well, he basically beats the mage using his anti-magic. So this is where Mereoleona would actually come and say that she was actually watching the fight go down, seeing if Asta truly had that will to become a magic knight. She notices the grimoire that he has and the magic that he has, and notices what it does, and that is to nullify magic. She basically says that he has some sort of anti-magic, and that she assumes that it only works with people who have no magic. Asta is excited for this, and he has a big relief of not having magic, right? So Mereoleona would be proud of both of them for getting so powerful. So Asta and Yuno would still have that 4 out of 5 cleverness, and not really a 5 out of 5. But both Yuno and Asta would have higher levels of strength. And yeah, I would also say that Asta has a better grip on ki because of those large amounts of mana zones that he would be in by traveling to place with Mereoleona and Yuno. So I think he would have a better sense of ki because of that. She then tells Asta and Yuno that the Magic Knights exam will be here soon in a few months, so you guys better train like hell to get in. So the training that she would do would be a lot more intense than it was in canon, and this is where they would actually go to a volcano just like they do in canon earlier. So this is where she actually tests them more than ever, and this is where Asta, or where Yuno, would activate his mana skin to be able to get through everything, while Asta, he is very limited to what he could do at this point, and he's in this life or death situation where he doesn't want to give up, and he doesn't want to die either. And Mereoleona basically says, well, Asta, you have been training your entire life to become the Wizard King, and you're just gonna give up now? You got lucky. You got your own grimoire. You got your own unique kind of power, and yet you're gonna give up now? Maybe you'll become lucky and become the Wizard King. And Asta tells her that no, that kind of job, you just can't get it with luck. You get it through valor. You get it through results. And this is where he would actually open up his grimoire and he would have this conversation with the devil. And I know, yes, he actually gets his black form earlier than in canon because of the rough training that he's been going through and the life and death situation that he has right now. I know you might be saying that the witch basically unlocked it, but I would say that because Asta was training in the mana zones for a long time and has a better connection with ki, which is one of the key factors on how he's able to use the black form, I would think that he'd be able to unlock it a bit more than it would be. And you could say that there was a sailing spell. Actually, no, I won't say that. But anyways, yes, he sees the devil, and he basically gives him that deal of him letting the devil take over his body. Asta would refuse and unlock his demon form, or his black form, I mean. And he would rush towards Mereoleona, basically going, because if you don't know how it works, the black form goes to the highest amount of mana in the area, as a kind of heat-seeking kind of thing, you could say, but with mana. She would obviously punch him, and this is where he would get a better control of it, and they would get to the top, to the hot spring. Asta's body would be a little bit more fatigued because he used black form at a very early stage and not really know what to do. So his body would have to recover from this for a bit, not saying too long, maybe a day or two. And this is kind of how they would train themselves. They would have to go up the kind of erupting volcano each time, so that they could really upgrade their, magic and Asta's new power. And keep in mind, this is a densely mana zone, so there's a lot of mana everywhere. So their sensing would be going up as well, at least, and a little bit of Asta, since he does use ki instead of mana sensing. So yeah, eventually they would get to the point where they need to go to the Magic Knights exam, and they would head off. But before they head off, this is where Mereoleona gives them something, and this is the family crest of the Vermilion family. So I'm getting this idea because a lot of noble families have their own crest that would show them that they are protected under a certain family, so they could give it out to people. But this time they're giving it to both Asta and Yuno because they're family, right? Not only that, but Mereoleona throughout the kind of years would have written back to her brother saying that she adopted 2 kids, and Mereoleona wouldn't ever really visit her brother, or really or either the other way around, where they wouldn't have Fogolion visit because he doesn't know where they're at and doesn't really want to disturb her. So they'd head off to the capital to go and do the Magic Knights exam, and they would get there in a couple of days because, well, they're a lot stronger and they would have more stamina. So they'd be able to basically rough it out more, as well as having basic survival skills from Mereoleona and her teaching. So because of this, Asta and Yuno do see her as a motherly figure, and the relationship that she has with both of them is that of a mother and her sons, not really a foster parent, because she was there when they were both kids and they don't know anything about their real parents. So Asta and Yuno are closer than they were in canon, and think of each other as actual brothers, not just, both orphans, I guess. So eventually they would get to the capital, and they would look at all the different, buildings, because most of their life they've been around wilderness, right? But it's not to say that they aren't, they don't have common sense, which they do from Mereoleona. So as they kept going, they eventually would find the area in where they would basically go to get their number for the entry exam. Yuno would get his, people would get shocked because of his 4-leaf clover. Asta would go behind him and no one really cares. Sekirei or Seke, I think his name was, would see that Asta doesn't seem like the brightest or really the strongest either, so he kind of sticks to him so that he might have a better chance of getting into the Magic Knights. They would get to the courtyard, and this is where he would have a bunch of birds on him, that being Asta, because he has no magic, while Yuno has no anti-magic birds on him. Because of the commotion of the birds, this is where Asta would actually get hit or bump into Yami, who was there for the entry exams. So he would apologize by saying kind of the worst combinations of words he could really think of, trying to compliment Yami, but at the same time not being really a compliment at all, talking about how scary he looks. And this really gets Yami somewhat mad, saying that, "Hey kid, do you want to die?" as he basically grips his head, and he would say, "Well, you better speak up, or else I'm going to start counting down." And he does so, and before he could actually get to 0, this is where the fireworks would go off, and the entry exam would actually start. So, for most of the exam, Asta doesn't really have a good score, because you need magic for most of them. But I would say one that he actually does do, at least partially, is that the flying test, right? So he wouldn't use the broom, instead he would use his black form to actually fly, and kind of have the broom near him so it looks like he's flying with the broom. And at this point he would have some control over his black form, so he wouldn't immediately rush to one of the captains because of his mana seeking kind of form. So he does get partial points, but not really too much. So eventually they would get to the part where they actually have to fight. So Seke basically goes with Asta, thinking that he's going to be an easy challenge. They would both get into the ring, and Seke would basically explain why he's becoming a Magic Knight, and that reason is to have a cushy job, something that pays well where he doesn't have to work too much. And Asta's very offended by this, because his dream is to become the Wizard King and have this kind of equality across all the people, because during his travels he would have seen the different ways that people lived, and he would see that some of it doesn't seem really fair, and as well as people being persecuted for their lack of magic, including himself. So this is really why he wants to become the Wizard King, even still. So also, when the countdown goes down, he would immediately rush Seke and break his Iron Creation magic, and knocking him out in the process. Each of the different captains would be surprised by this, thinking that he's like really fast for not using any magic, or think that he did use some sort of magic, they just don't know what, because they can't really sense it off of him. This is where Yuno would do his match, and it's a more one-sided fight than it was in canon, because Yuno has been training a lot more than he was in canon, and from an earlier age as well, so he's a lot stronger than he is normally. So we would get to the actual selection process, and Yuno would get into the Golden Dawn because of his his big kind of spectacle that he did. And they would go down each kind of candidate until they get to Asta. And when Asta goes up there, no one really wants him, including Yami. So he's kind of panicking and doesn't know what to do. And this is where he shows them his crest, and it's the Vermilion crest. And this is where Nozel, I believe his name was, would basically say, "Why do you have a royal's crest? What kind of forgery is this?" And Yami knows that it's not, and so does Vermilion, or so does Fragolion. And he would tell Nozel, "It's no forgery. This is my sister's son, or one of them." And Nozel's like, "What? How? He looks nothing like you." And this is where Fragolion would say, "It's her adopted son." And this is where Fragolion and Yami would have raised their hand. And both would, say their reasons why they would want him. So Frigolion says, "You are my sister's son. It's a family tradition to join the what's it called? The golden, or not the golden, the Crimson Lion Kings. Vermilion should always go here, especially someone like you who's directly my nephew, or I guess not really directly, but you know what I mean." And Yami was like, "I see the promise in you, kid. You have something unique about yourself, and I really like that." And I would say that he does have a big kind of choice to make. And this is where I'm actually going to end it. I'll have a poll on this video deciding on which squad he should go on, that being the Crimson Lion Kings or the Black Bulls. So you guys can tell me down below which squad do you want Asta to be in. Obviously, Yuno still goes with the Golden Dawn because it gives him the highest chance to become the Wizard King. So yeah, with that being said, remember, if you like this video, give it a like. If you want more of this series, follow me, or I guess subscribe. If you want more content, you know what to do. Join my Discord if you want to know about the latest stuff, as well as participate in some of my original series. If you made it to the end of the video, please comment down CS so I know that you're supporting the channel. And with that being said, it's gonna be the end of the video. So yeah.